You're tuned into news across the galaxy where they talk all things LA Galaxy with the Nag Boys. Let's start nagging.
What is up, fellow G's, and welcome to News Across the Galaxy's midweek show. I'm your host for tonight, Edgar Zuniga. I am joined tonight by Bryant on the ones and twos. What's up, Bryant? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, he's saying hi. Okay. Just imagine a Salvadorian anime fan saying hi to you, and that's Bryant. I can hear it in my head, so maybe I'm hearing things like Randy Orton, but who knows? Anyway, to help us preview the LA Galaxy's Decision Day match versus Houston Dynamo, we have special guest Colin Toro, host of the Keeping Tabs podcast, coming to us all the way from Galveston. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm ready to talk some Dynamo, and it's going to be a pretty good podcast, I'd say.
Well, let's start off with the last time these two teams played each other earlier this year on May 25th, I think it was. And the last thing image that we have from that game, which was a Galaxy victory, was Ricky Puig and Ben Olsen going after each other after the match. What the heck was that all about?
Man, Ben Olsen, like in my opinion, is known for being like a very animated character. He's very uh like vocal about what he thinks is right or what he thinks is wrong. I don't remember the context specifically of what happened, but man, I'll be honest, I was thinking Ben Olsen was going to get fined or something from that because that was a little out of pocket. It seemed like it could have been frustrations just from losing, or maybe he was just being salty. But all I know is that Ben, he's very, what's the word? Like, very frequently getting yellow cards on the sideline from, overstepping the boundary or yelling at the refs. So whenever I saw that, I was honestly not that surprised, but I was surprised at the same time because you can't do that as a coach, man. You can't go and place contact on a player at their stadium. So I thought that was a little out of pocket for sure. But, you know, Dynamo and LA Galaxy do have a nice little rivalry. So maybe that builds to the rivalry just a little bit. Like, maybe it adds a little bit more to the lore, to the iceberg of the Dynamo and LA Galaxy rivalry.
Yeah, it's something that I mentioned on Twitter as we were coming into this pod was that when you mentioned Houston Dynamo and Decision Day, a lot of Galaxy fans start to get some PTSD, and maybe it's something weird because when we look back at the history between these two teams as far as Decision Day is concerned, there was there were 2 years in 2018 and 2019 when Houston did defeat the LA Galaxy at the end of the season, and that really hurt Galaxy. But since then, it hasn't really been much of that. But it's like, is it really an illusion having to go to play Houston on Decision Day, and everybody thinks, oh my God, it's a scary situation. But in reality, LA Galaxy have done pretty good for themselves. Uh, what about from the Houston side of things? Do you guys look at the schedule and you're like, oh, we're playing Galaxy, on Decision Day? Haha, that should be an easy win for us.
Before the season started, after looking at the schedule, knowing the history like recently between Dynamo and Galaxy and Decision Day, while the Dynamo were playing at home, I was honestly pretty okay with that. However, looking at the season now and how the Dynamo have been doing versus how the Galaxy have been doing, it's scary because I'm not sure. Are y'all? Can y'all drop? Can y'all drop the if y'all lose? Is there a scenario?
Yes,
Yes.
if if LAFC wins their game and Galaxy loses to Houston Dynamo, they will leapfrog the LA Galaxy and take the top spot in the West. Galaxy has comes into this game needing at least a draw to secure the top spot, and then hope that LAFC doesn't like absolutely obliterate the Smurfs, which could happen. but I don't think anybody goes into these games saying, "Oh, a draw's enough." I'm pretty sure that right now Greg Vanny's getting his guys prepared to go into H Town, looking to get a big win. So yeah, Houston absolutely could ruin LA Galaxy's day and end their season on a sour note. And now, was it going to happen? What do you think, Colin?
Well, that's a tough question because the Dynamo are sort of coming off of a low after losing to St. Louis 3-0 pretty terribly to a pretty bad team objectively, in my opinion. And Galaxy are coming off of a high, just beating Austin, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And the Dynamo also are coming off of a rest week, and I'm not sure if that plays more into our favor or plays more into the Galaxy's favor. The weather should be pretty nice for Houston, all considered. So that the Dynamo won't have that advantage of the heat and humidity. Um, I think it's going to come down to a defensive performance. Um, what do you think? What's your opinion on that?
Well, while you're talking, I'm just looking behind you and I see that picture of Meliodas you have back there from the Seven Deadly Sins, and I'm like, dude, that's pretty cool. Just wanted to say that. I think that's pretty neat. But as far as this game, let's before we start talking about the game itself, let's take a step back. And can you tell us about Houston Dynamo and what has happened since the last time Galaxy and Houston played each other in May? Because, like I said, that lasting image was of Ricky Puig and Ben Olsen going at each other. Like I was telling you before we came on, I remember interviewing Ben Olsen when he was a rookie with DC United way back in '97, and he's always struck me as being kind of an odd fellow. Um, and so I was a little bit surprised that he went after Ricky, but um, at the same time, I'm not too surprised because he's a very animated person. But you talk to a lot of people on MLS, and he's done very good with Houston Dynamo. So I'm just curious to know what has happened with Houston Dynamo since then, leading up to this match that we're going to have this weekend.
So since that match about midseason against the Galaxy, the Dynamo have done really good. It was sort of a parallel between last season and this season for how the Dynamo began the first half of the season. I think we began this half a little slower, and we were not taking care of business at home, which is very uncharacteristic about the Dynamo, which I believe will play a part into this LA Galaxy versus Dynamo match. Um, the Dynamo are one of the worst Western Conference teams at home, but not playing into this match, the Dynamo are very good away, which is why we're not so far down the table. But at home, we have a negative record, and we've been very bad since that LA Galaxy match. I believe the last 18 matches, which is how far that match spans, we've only lost 4 games. Um, we've been really, really good. And I know that coming off a 3-0 loss to a terrible team is a bad time to say this, but our defense has been the main reason that we've been so good. I think Mikael, the Brazilian 23-year-old center back, um, I think he's genuinely something that's going to, prosper into a really, really, really good MLS center back. He's young, he's prone to making a mistake a game, and that's something to look forward to in our matchup. But since that time that we played Galaxy, we've almost been perfect on defense, despite some rocky games. We've given up, I believe, I don't know that I don't have the stat right in front of me, but in terms of Western Conference goals given up, we're near the bottom of that regard. Um, but yeah, the Dynamo like to hold on to the ball. Uh, During that stretch, we have the second most possession out of any team in the league, just behind the Crew, and everyone knows how good the Crew is. But yeah, I'd say since that stretch, the Dynamo have done pretty well.
And we must say, you've done all of this without the service of Ache, who began the season injured. He actually came back, played for a bit, but was only able to tally one goal. And then for the last, what I heard of it, he got injured like 2 3 weeks ago, and he's been out since then. I heard that he might be back for the playoffs. Um, but did they really need him? I mean, is he one of those players that has that kind of an impact on the club, or do you think that Houston Dynamo is really looking forward to having him come back once the playoffs begin?
If I'm Ben Olsen asking that question, he'd say that he's really looking forward to having Ache Ache back. But since you're asking me, I'll say that we have almost looked better without him. And that's because 33, 34-year-old Hector Herrera is just not the same player he was last year. He got the injury at the beginning of the season, like you mentioned earlier, really set him back. And it took him up until the point, maybe, 3 weeks before he got injured, to where I'd say he was full fitness. And then now this injury again, who knows what kind of effect that will have. Last year he was in the runnings for MVP. This year he has like 1 goal and 3 assists. I don't know the number directly, but it's nothing like it was last year. Coco was actually playing that deep lying playmaking role that Ache Ache occupies at the Dynamo, and something that Dynamo fans have been begging for is it's to see Coco in that position, because that's what Coco plays with Panama, and that's what he did whenever he won the best player at the Gold Cup, and that's what he plays whenever all these um, uh, overseas teams, are really looking at him, is for his international performances. Because in a Dynamo shirt, Coco is he's good. Don't get me wrong, but somehow you're always really asking for more. But in this span of games, Coco playing in Ache Ache's role as a deep line playmaker, he's been phenomenal. He had a beautiful bicycle goal kick against Austin to win 1-0 away for our first ever win in Austin. Um, he had 2 assists in our 2-1 win, or 2-0 win against New England. 2-1 win, my bad. 2-1 win against New England. He had 2 assists. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And for that reason, you know, it's hard for me to say that we can displace Ache Ache, right? He's getting paid the big bucks. He's still the big man DP. He's still the Mexican international, you know, that we bought in to play this role. So that being said, Coco does not like take priority when he is healthy, which I have not heard any update on that. Uh, I do expect Ache Ache to slot directly back into that deep line playmaking role.
Would you say the impact that he has on the team would be something similar to what Marco Roche does for the LA Galaxy? Because Marco Roche came in 5 matches he only has 1 goal and 2 assists. But you talk to Galaxy fans, and he'll tell you his impact goes more than just on the score sheet, because he's had such a calming effect on Ricky Puig and the Galaxy offense, and it takes some of that pressure off of Ricky Puig, so that way it expands the Galaxy attack. Having Hector Herrera come back to Houston Dynamo, would he have that similar effect, or is he expected to come back and start producing right away?
Ache Ache is a great player. Um, Maybe he was close to world class in his prime, but I would never be able to compare Marco Royce and Ache Ache one on one. I think what Marco Royce provides at the Galaxy, despite his lack of goal production, is a lot more in terms of helping your team score goals, which in MLS is a lot. That means a lot more, um, in my personal opinion, with the high scoring league that we are. Uh, so I think that Marco Royce definitely provides more in that regard than Ache Ache. Um, so I think the hope is that Ache Ache will come and produce when he gets back. Um, but I just don't see that happening. I see the injury like it did at the beginning of the season, just setting him back. And I'd love to be wrong about this, because Ache Ache, only in his 2.5 seasons here, he's already a Dynamo legend, already bringing a trophy to the club. So there's nothing more than what I would want, is to see him to come back guns blazing and get the Dynamo back on track after a 3-0 loss to uh, St. Louis. But I see his I see him coming back slow. I see his time back on the field, coming back slow, and kind of getting back into the groove. It's going to take a while, in my opinion. So if we can see that by playoffs, that'd be great. But um, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and I did check the statistics right now regarding the amount of goals that Houston Dynamo has given up, and you're absolutely correct. With the team has only given up 38 goals, which is second only to Seattle Sounders, which is another club that has been pretty hot in the back leg of the season. A team that even some of their own podcasters had written off earlier in the season. Now Seattle got hot, and then Houston got hot. Um, and so it just goes to show that defense how important it is to have a solid defense on your club, especially when you're hurting up top. But aside from Acha, you already mentioned Coco. What are some names that LA Galaxy fans need to look out for on decision day from Houston that you can be like, oh my God, we got to watch out for this guy because this guy could hurt us on the offense?
Griffin Dorsey was the first player that came to my mind. He's our right back and plays pretty much as a right wing back, but he's always stationed. On defense or in possession, he definitely does play like further up as a right winger. He's probably the most important player to our attack. Like he's the most dynamic player we have, and that might be going off the rails a little bit to say a name like Griffin Dorsey. Some people might say Ezekiel Ponce. Some people might say Coco. Some people might say Ibrahim Aliou, who has the most goals and most assists on this Dynamo team this year. But I think Griffin Dorsey, what he provides is width and a stretch down that field that nobody on this team has. He's one of the only players that's willing and capable to take a player on 1v1. So I would have to say Griffin Dorsey. He's really the only player that's capable of putting in a meaningful cross in the box as well. So I'd say attacking down that right hand side with Griffin Dorsey and Bossy ahead of him is going to be our best bet.
Thank you. When we talk about the Houston defense, right, and we talk about how like they only gave up 38 goals this season, or they have given up only 38 goals this season. Of course, you got to bring up the name of Steve Clark. How come Clark isn't really mentioned among some of the top MLS goalkeepers? Because when you talk about who should be goalkeeper of the year, a lot of people are saying Christian Kalina, from Charlotte, or Freeze from New York City. What about Steve Clark?
That's a great point. I don't know how many clean sheets Clark has. I do know that that's one of the main metrics used to really define a goalkeeper's season. But he's been really good. I think most of what Clark provides is through his distribution, in my personal opinion. But maybe one reason that he's flying under the radar is just that he's old. He's turning 39, and I think it's pretty much clear to everyone in the Dynamo organization that he's not going to be here next season. And maybe that's being seen from the Tom Bogerts, the Matt Doyles of the world as well. And uh, maybe that's why, but I'm not sure. That's a good point because Dynamo have been one of the best defenses in the league, and the goalkeeper is the main thing that you look at that when you look at that metric. So that's a good point. I'm not sure, but I would have to say maybe his age and lack of longevity with the club, being that I think he'll be gone next season, is maybe why.
Now I'm just looking at a quick log of his of his matches this season. It looks like he has 9 clean sheets, including 3 in a row at one point against LAFC twice, and then against Toronto. Although I think the LAFC game, I think one of them was an Open Cup match. I think I'm not quite sure, but the fact that he got so many clean sheets, man, he definitely should be in the talk as far as goalkeeper of the year. Now LA Galaxy has had a difficult time going up against top goalkeepers. But another concern for LA Galaxy fans is how opponents do on set pieces, because that's something that affected the team a lot in the early part of the season, and which has come back to rear its head on several occasions as the season has winded down to the end. How does Houston Dynamo do on free kicks and set pieces? And do you think they could be effective against an LA Galaxy defense that is kind of leaky sometimes when it comes to that?
We just don't have any big bodies really to that can get their heads on balls, and I think that's the best ball that Hector Herrera can provide, given that he plays. I think we only have six set piece goals. Sorry, on the year, and I just don't think we're that dangerous. Our main target is always Fiatchenko, but he just got his first MLS goal against New England a couple games back, and it wasn't even a header. I mean, it was a beautiful strike. Don't get me wrong, but on set pieces, I would not say we're that dangerous. However, corner kicks, I'm not sure if that falls under a set piece. I do think we're pretty
Oh
good at
yeah.
corner kicks. I do think we're okay at corner kicks.
Okay. So you mentioned about how Houston went on this really good run over especially towards the middle part of the season and over the last 2 months. But then there was that big loss to St. Louis, which you alluded to earlier, 3-0 loss in St. Louis. If you talk to the St. Louis podcasters and you talk to the St. Louis supporters, they will tell you that this is the real St. Louis team, the one that's playing right now. That earlier in the season they had injuries, they had people that weren't playing up to form, and that it took them this long for the St. Louis to really get going. So is this a bad sign for Houston Dynamo, or do you feel like it's just a bump in the road, especially towards the end of the season?
See, at the end of last season, whenever we did make the Western Conference Finals, we ended the season very, very strong. Um, I wouldn't say that this loss worries me, for instance, because I'm sort of like the type of fan where, okay, we do this, I can accept this. And given that we went to Austin, we went to LAFC away, we got wins, I can stomach this. But the performance was really, really bad. Um, the result does not really bother me as much as the performance does because I don't think that St. Louis are a good team. You know, we all have injuries. Everybody does. You know, I don't ever like to use that as like a justification. Um, so I think that I mean it's not really that worrisome. I'll be honest.
Okay. Well, let's get into the game itself. Galaxy is going to be playing Houston this weekend on Decision Day, like we mentioned. All-time record between these two teams pretty much is like right in the middle, right? And this is what you want to ask for as far as drama, as far as a good rivalry. Although I don't know if you could call this a rivalry, but when you talk to a lot of Galaxy fans regarding the kind of headaches that Houston has given the Galaxy over the years, they will point to Houston and say, "Yeah, these guys, can be troublesome." So all time, Galaxy has 14 wins and 10 draws, and guess what? Houston also has 14 wins. As far as playing in Houston, LA Galaxy has 7 wins, 4 draws, and 9 losses. Um, and just to add a little bit of a twist into this whole thing, let's talk about who's going to be the officiator. The official for this match is Rosendo Mendoza. Rosendo Mendoza has been an MLS referee since 2019. He has officiated 85 regular season matches. Of those, 4 with the LA Galaxy, during which Galaxy has 3 wins, 1 draw, no losses, including 1 win and 1 draw away. As far as Houston Dynamo is concerned, Mendoza has done 7 matches, including 1 win, 1 draw, and 5 losses. Playing at home with Mendoza, Houston has a record of 1 win, 1 draw, and 2 losses. Mendoza's last Galaxy match was a very tense 4-3 win over San Jose on April 21st earlier this season, where he handed out 4 yellow cards to San Jose, 2 to LA Galaxy, and 1 red card to the LA Galaxy. His last Houston match was a 1-0 loss that Houston suffered in Seattle on July 1st of 2023, where he handed out 2 yellows to Seattle, 3 to Houston, and a second yellow card, which resulted in a red card. And if you're in case you're curious, in 2024, he's averaging 4.38 yellows per game, and he's already handed out 5 red cards. Um, and just again to reiterate, in the 4 matches he has officiated with LA Galaxy, they have yet to lose a match. This includes a 3-0 win in Houston on October 20th of 2021, which is like practically 3 years ago. And Houston's last win with him was on April 22nd of 2023, which was a 1-0 win at home over Inter Miami before a certain Leo Messi showed up. Um, so, what do you think about that, Colin? When you take into consideration not just the record Galaxy has in Houston, but when you look at the referees, and a lot of people say, the official shouldn't matter. But then, like I mentioned before we came on, I was like, I've been tracking these referee assignments throughout the season, and then you start to see patterns, and it's kind of like reading the tea leaves, and you kind of have an idea of what the outcome of the match is going to be. And like I said, Dynamo has only ever won one game with this guy. What are your thoughts?
The main thing that jumped out to me with that was the amount of red cards he hands out, because that's one of the main things I look at a ref is how they can control the game without giving cards. Because I think that is the best refs, that they're able to control games without giving cards. So that does scare me. And actually, you did jog my memory with that Seattle match last year. I remember specifically it was a red card on Mikael, and I was so perplexed on how it was a red card. I can't remember if it was a second yellow or a red card. I just know that I was like, what the heck? Like, how did this happen? So already I'm not like having the best vibes with this referee. Um and like we talked about in the lobby before we started, personally, I don't like to argue that refs uh can decide the outcome of a match. They definitely impact the game, and obviously there's instances here and there where okay, yeah, they definitely hurt the cause. But I don't know. I think it's sort of cheap to go and be like, yeah, we lost this game because of the ref. Um, but who knows, man? MLS has some terrible referees. Like both of the Pensos. Oh my gosh! Like oh my
How come
lord!
you Houston podcasters? You're the second guy from Houston that I talked to that talks crap about the pencils, especially Tory Pencil.
Oh my god! Oh my god! It's so bad. She is not a good referee. She is not a good referee. But a point that I kind of wanted to touch on is that you kind of mentioned that we're kind of rivals, but if you ask anybody from Houston, like we view y'all as pretty like fierce rivals. Like we definitely
Really?
yeah, we definitely don't like like LA Galaxy down here.
Oh
That's of
gosh.
course bringing it back to 2011 and 2012, where y'all beat us back to back in the MLS Cup. Um, and yeah, no, we definitely have a very big rivalry. I think I would put y'all above Austin in terms of who I view as rivals.
Wow, that's really interesting because I would think, with the history with FC Dallas there, and then Austin coming in as like the noisy new neighbors, that there would be some of that there. But you're talking about LA Galaxy and Houston Dynamo. Wow, that's
Well,
interesting.
Austin FC are like our little brothers, not even our brothers, like our little step cousin. Like they're over there, like they don't like us, and they think that there's a real rivalry. There's nothing. Us and FC Dallas, there's history. Um, but man, it's hard to build a rivalry whenever the fan bases just don't show up. And FC Dallas and Houston Dynamo are notoriously bad for fan support, and fans build the rivalry. So, but back whenever it was 2011, 2012, the Dynamo had a pretty strong fan base. So I think that's where our rivalry really stems from. It's hard for y'all to hate us for beating us in 2011 and 2012, but we definitely hold some. We definitely hold some of uh, that resentment from back then.
I was actually right now. I was trying to look for a photo that I took for that 2012 MLS Cup final, where I remember somebody I don't know if it was on a dare or what the hell I was thinking, but before the match started, I wandered right into the middle of the Houston supporter section and wearing all Galaxy gear, and I asked them if I could take a photo surrounded by all of them, and they looked at me like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And one of them is like, "All right, just do it real quick." And then so my friend took a photo of me, and I'm just standing there smiling, with all these just surrounded by the sea of orange, right? And then later I look at the photo, and like half the people there are like giving me the bird.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was kind of funny, but yeah, that's fascinating that there's that sense of like, yeah, we know we beat LA, right? Um, now, let's see. As far as this match is concerned, what do you think it will take for the LA Galaxy to defeat the Houston Dynamo on decision day?
On the so we're very weak in the air, and you know I'm assuming Joveljic will be the starter.
Yeah, no, he's been catching fire as of late, and for the longest time, LA Galaxy had to deal. Well, I don't know if deal with, but um, we're very thin up top, right? And so it's either Dejan Joveljic or Miguel Berry. And Miguel Berry, well,
Oh my
he's a
god.
fan favorite, right? People call him San Miguel Berry and all that stuff, but he's not a starter. He's the guy who comes off the bench and he gives you some quick offense when you need it, a clutch goal here and there. Actually, just two clutch goals the entire season. People think he scores more often than he does, but he doesn't. So it all comes down to Dejan Joveljic. And so when he starts, there's a pretty good chance that the ball will find his feet and he's going to put it on frame. So, yes.
I don't know if you remember when the Galaxy came to Houston last season, where all the red cards were thrown at the end of the match. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. And wasn't Douglas Costa involved in
Yes,
this?
yes,
Yeah,
he was. Um, yeah, as a Dynamo fan, I would say obviously Ricky is going to be our biggest problem. Um, it's going to be really interesting because most of the teams that we play, I'd say that the Dynamo's midfield comes out on top, and that's really where we win the games with Arthur, Coco, and Herrera. Um, of course, if Herrera doesn't start, I would assume that Sevev Kowalczyk, the Polish midfielder, he'll get the start. He's also very good, and I'd say that most of the time our midfield comes out on top. But looking at it on paper, that's a pretty good midfield you have. I mean, Marky Delgado, he's a very very solid, and he always gives you a certain baseline. I feel like that he doesn't go below, and I feel like he's a very solid MLS midfielder. um
yeah. One of the things that LA Galaxy has this year that they haven't had for a really long time is depth. Because in the past, you would have one or two really important players get hurt and the team would suffer. Or if somebody just had to sit out for whatever reason, international duty, or just maybe a healthy scratch, the team would suffer. But as the season has progressed, you're starting to realize that the job that the new general manager Will Kuntz has done with this team doesn't just extend to getting big contracts to players like a Gabriel Peck, Joseph Paintil to have him join the Galaxy offense, but putting all the pieces together to make this LA Galaxy team very deep. So when Ricky Puig got injured in the middle of the season, a lot of people were concerned that what that LA Galaxy had done up until that point would fall apart. When in reality, they actually got stronger. They actually went on a 4-game winning streak, and they were able to win without Ricky. And this was around the time when Gabriel Peck really caught fire. And since then, the team has been pretty solid. And so, yeah, that Galaxy midfield and that depth that they have is, I think, one of the greatest strengths of this team. And you talk to Galaxy fans about this, and half of them will be like, after everything we've been through for the last 10 years, it's still kind of hard to believe that this team is as strong as a lot of people, say they are, or as a lot of the, as the numbers, because you look at the statistics and This is historically one of the better teams in Galaxy history. But then you talk to other Galaxy fans, and they absolutely sold on the team, and they're saying this is it, raise the says, and we're back, baby. So we'll see. I mean, but like I said, the depth of this team is going to carry it, and I'm just curious to see how much that rivalry that Houston has in its heart against LA will bring that fire to the field. Now, quick question, because you mentioned Houston, LA, right? And you can't go far without talking about the Dodgers and the Astros. And I wonder how much of that rivalry doesn't just extend back to the MLS Cup, but also to what happened between the Dodgers and the Astros in the World Series.
That's a great point. I definitely 100% think that that's where some of the Galaxy or the LA rivalry comes from. Now, in our little pregame talk in the lobby, the Astros, that's a forbidden word over there in LA.
Yes.
And rightly
No,
so.
yeah.
You talk to some Astros fans, and you know some of them are very adamant, but we cheated. We got caught. We cheated. But one thing I can say, we did come back and win a real one. We won a real one. We did cheat though, and a lot of people ask me, does that taint the memory for you? Because let me tell you, this was 2017. This was during Harvey. I don't know if y'all
Oh, I
remember
remember
Harvey. Yeah,
Hurricane Harvey. Yeah.
and this was like where the entire city of Houston came together as a community and supported the Astros, and that was one of my core memories of sports. And back to the point, people ask me like, does it taint the memory? And it does. It does taint the memory of, you know, it's hard to say that like we're the best whenever we cheated. And a lot of teams do what we did, but we got caught.
Yeah, and as a Dodger fan, I know it's kind of an aside, but as a Dodger fan, it didn't just hurt to lose to the Astros in 2017, but then to have it happen to you again the following year against the Red Sox team that also cheated. It's like, damn, 2 years in a row. That's pretty rough. But in case anybody's wondering, the Dodgers did win tonight. They're one game away from the World Series, so uh, hopefully they can finally get back there and maybe challenge for a World Series and bring one home again. But we're talking about LA Galaxy and Houston Dynamo right now. Um, so yeah, let's talk predictions then. Um, because we mentioned the referee, we've mentioned the history between these two teams. What is your prediction for this match? And do you think, actually, before you give me a prediction, do you think we might see Ache come back in this game? Because I heard he's ready to come back. The playoffs are right around the corner. Do you think that they're gonna put Ben Olsen's gonna put him out there just to get him moving, get a little blood pumping before the playoffs begin, or you think they're just gonna wrap him up in bubble wrap and wait for the playoffs to begin? And then give me your prediction.
Well, I think it'd be most beneficial to sub him in late into the match. Um, Maybe like the 75th minute. Yeah, just to get him warm, just to get him reacclimated because he's an old man. I mean, soccer terms, 34, 35, that's near the end of your career. So I think it'd be very beneficial if he's ready. I don't want to force anything to get him out there and get him a few touches on the ball. I think it's almost 0% chance he starts. Now, I don't have like any insider information or anything like that, and I haven't heard anything about his recovery period. But I do know that the timetable has passed. It's either right about to pass or it has passed. So I wouldn't be surprised if he came in, but I would be very, very surprised if I saw him start. Um, Predictions are very tough. Galaxy have a scary team. Galaxy have a very, very scary team. One of the best in MLS. Um, and I feel like Jovic, we always have such bad luck with him. And, there's a lot of better players I could be focusing on, but, you know, giving up goals to guys uh, of, Jovic's frame and play style is something that Dynamo have done a lot. Like, he can just show up in the box. He's so shifty in the box, and he can even get his head on balls. And that's something that Dynamo really struggle in. Low crosses in the box or headers. Um, it's going to be tough. Prediction wise, I'm going to go Dynamo 1, LA Galaxy 1. I think it'll be a tie game, especially because the implications are so much for both teams. But, Greg Vanny having this, you know, resurgence of a year, good on him. I love him as a coach. He has his
Of
team
course.
fighting. And I really like what the Galaxy have done this year. And Ricky, one of my favorite players, and Marco Royce, of course. Hopefully, I see him because he's one of my favorite players in the world. Like I'm a huge like Dortmund fan on the side. So yeah, I would say 1-1 is a tie.
Ooh, so you're gonna have us like on pins and needles then, right? Because a draw, yeah, a draw against the Galaxy, that top spot in the West. Yeah, considering LAFC doesn't absolutely obliterate the Smurfs, but my goodness, I think most Galaxy fans will want a W. Now, what am I predicting? My goodness, like you said, it is tough to predict because the last time they played each other was so long ago, and um, that game in St. Louis is kind of strange for Houston because they were in such a high, and then you have that big loss in St. Louis, and I'm wondering if it's just an outlier or if it's just like some kind of weird fluke. So I don't know. I will say it's going to be tight. These games are always really tight, but I will have to go be a positive Pete, baby. I say Galaxy gets the 2-1 win and adds another log to the fire that is that rivalry between Houston Dynamo and the LA Galaxy. What do you think? You think I'm too crazy with that, or you think it could happen?
Well, something we didn't talk about, which plays into your prediction, is Escobar will be out. He got a red card versus St. Louis, and he's a lock-in starter for that left side. He's a big part of the attack and defense in that regard. So, yeah, I mean, personally, with how the Dynamo have done at home this season, that's not far fetched to say 2-1. I mean, Galaxy are one of the hottest teams in the league, have one of the best rosters in the league, and is one of the best teams in the league right now in general. Um, you know, Dynamo's defense at home, when we lose games, it's by 1 goal margins. So I don't know. The Dynamo's defense is really good, uh, but LA Galaxy's attack is really good. I think if any team wins, personally, I do think the Dynamo would win, but in my opinion, I think the likeliest scenario is a 1-1 draw.
Okay, so let's talk about something that I mentioned to you before we came on. It's something that the last couple of weeks I have been a guest on podcasts from the Eastern Conference. I was on Scarves and Spikes. I was on MLS Battered Fans podcast, and at some point or other, people start to talk about the playoffs, and then the question came up: who is the dark horse? Because people love that, right? People, we love an underdog. We love like to see little surprises here and there. But who is the dark horse that's going to come out of the West and out of the East? And when in the during the conversation, a lot of the people from the Eastern Conference, they really believe that Houston Dynamo is the dark horse that's coming out of the West, and that they could go on a run that takes them all the way to MLS Cup. What do you think about that? You think there's some validity behind that?
No. We're capped at Western Conference Finals, and even last season was a playoff fantasy run. It was a Tinkerbell, fantasy uh, story that honestly took a lot of luck, especially with Hector Herrera picking up another injury, which I think will affect his overall performance and just how vital he was to that run last year. Um, and you've seen like with his absence, he's not his normal self. While Coco has done really well stepping in that deep lying playmaking spot that Hector Herrera takes up, I just don't see us getting that far. Uh, Personally, I like Vancouver a lot as dark horses, and I don't know if Real Salt Lake, being as good as they are, is a dark horse, but I like them too. I'd take them over the Dynamo this season. Um, Had you asked me that question before, Lawrence Anali, our $3 million U22 transfer that we got mid-season before he tore his ACL, I think we would, you know, go all the way. In my personal opinion, he was that good. But having to start uh, Aliu, who overall is just, he's very, very wishy-washy, and overall, I don't think he's that good of a player. He's also a U22 player, and while he does lead the team in goals and assists with 6 goals, 5 assists, his last goal I think was like in like late May or early June, like a long time ago. I don't know the specific date, but it's been a long time. Um, I'm flattered, of course. Like you said, how you and the LA Galaxy fans feel about how good y'all are and how surreal it feels. You ask any Houston fan, and we'd say the same thing. However, injuries hurt us this year, and Ezekiel Ponce not quite being up to speed, and Lawrence Denali, that U22 player, getting his ACL torn, that really, really hurts us. We're not scoring goals like we should. We're defending well, but like I mentioned earlier, defense is overshadowed by goals in MLS. You need goals to win. Um, I don't think we go all the way. Um, I think we're capped at Western Conference Finals, but in my personal opinion, we're probably first round exits this year. Um, yeah, that's what I had to say.
Okay, before we wrap it up, I'm just curious to know, looking at the Houston Dynamo, not just from the beginning of the season, because we're at the end right now of the regular season. Looking at Houston Dynamo, how they were at the beginning of the season and how they were at the end of last season, do you feel that they're trending in the right direction, or are they about to go off a cliff?
So the 3-0 loss, it raises eyebrows, but to St. Louis, of course, it raises eyebrows, but it doesn't really change how the season has gone for me, which overall has been pretty well considering all the injuries that we've had, and having to change the lineups with as frequently as we have been. um, I don't think it changes my overall thoughts on how the season went. I think the seasons went fine. A lot of things could have gone better, but yeah, I think that the Dynamo have been trending up for sure. We have had big results away to LAFC, to Austin, um, big home wins to New England, who you know haven't been the best team, but implications were if they win, they keep the playoff hopes alive, and if they lose, they're out. So that's always a tough game to deal with, regardless of the talent of the team. So I'd say we've had some big wins in the last 10 games, and like I said earlier, the Dynamo were on or are on a 19 or 18 game stretch of only having 4 losses in that time period. So that's a very good stretch. Um, but from what I've seen, we played okay. We've had a good season, a decent season, but not good enough for me to warrant thinking that we'd go to the MLS Cup.
Now, you said you capped them at the Western Conference Final. Earlier this season, I was talking to one of the LAFC pods, and we both said the MLS Cup is going to come through LA one way or another. And if Houston Dynamo gets that far, would you rather them face LA Galaxy or LAFC in the final?
Oh, LAFC, because we've had their number the last 2 years. We went home and away and beat them last year, back to back as well as this year, back to back. We went home and away. And no, actually, I take that back. We tied them at home.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, we tied
it
them at
was it
home.
was it was you beat them here, and then you had a tie over there in Houston. So LAFC fans, I'm telling you, man, I've talked to a few of them. And they look at Houston and they're like, "Yeah, we'd rather avoid Houston." It's almost kind of like how LA Galaxy fans feel about Houston. Like, yeah, we'd rather not play those guys, but
Well, let me
we'll
ask you
see.
this. Let me ask you
Go ahead.
this. I don't know if you're aware of how MLS Next Pro does their playoffs. It's a very cool concept. The top seeds pick who they want to play. Now, assuming you finish first, who would you pick to play in the playoffs for your first match?
Vancouver.
Wow,
we
really?
Yeah, we
Really?
beat them twice this season. So we beat them at BC Place and we beat them at home. So that's one team that LA Galaxy has done well against this season. So Yeah, and Vancouver seems like a team that's always on the verge of something really good, and then something happens and they get stymied, and they look kind of fragile to me. But you never know. You know, what's the name? Mark, their
Vinny
manager. I forgot.
Sartini. Vinny
Yeah,
Sartini.
Sartini. Yeah, Sartini. He's an interesting fella. I know he yelled like crazy at his boys because they lost that game to LAFC, the game that they should have won. But that's the kind of fire you want in your manager, especially as you're heading into the playoffs. All right, well, let's wrap it up here. Colin, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you on and sharing your point of view from Houston Dynamo. Can you tell people that have been watching or listening to us where they can find you on social media and keeping tabs as well?
Okay, sure. You can go ahead and follow me at X at Keeping Tabs Pod. We're also on Instagram, Keeping Tabs Pod, as well as YouTube, Keeping Tabs Podcast. We're mainly active on X. We do a lot of short videos, short previews. But when we like to get down and rowdy in the podcast every now and then. So you can also check us out on Spotify, Keeping Tabs Podcast.
And you have the little Meeseeks looking guy as your avatar on Twitter, which we've mentioned before. He's a funny looking fella. So we're gonna see more of him, right, in the future.
Oh yeah, we're gonna see more of him in the future. We actually are talking with the animator who designed the character, and we're gonna get some animations out. We're fickling out the details, but next season we should have some animations, and I think that's gonna be really really cool for all the Houston Dynamo fans.
I think it would be cool just for MLS in general because it's one thing to have your podcast, but it's also to throw in something a little bit different, have a little animation, have a little fun, right, with your MLS content. Well, anybody who wants to know more about LA Galaxy or some of the MLS content that I'm always talking about, you can follow me on Twitter X as at Edgar Nags, also on Instagram, Edgar Nags, and of course News Across the Galaxy at nag_news on Twitter, and you can also follow us on Instagram and on YouTube as Nag News. So for me, for Colin and Bryant, we want to get out of here right now. As always, hey, keep on nagging and baby Wu Tang for life. Let's go.